You know that feeling when you open your banking app and for just a second, you hold your breath? You're not even sure why. It's not like the number's going to be wildly different from yesterday, but there's this tiny knot in your stomach, this background hum of anxiety that never quite goes away. Maybe you've got enough to cover rent. Maybe you don't. Either way, you feel it. And here's what's strange. Almost nobody talks about the moment that feeling finally stops. There's a specific amount of money, a threshold, where something shifts inside your brain. And I'm not talking about becoming a millionaire. I'm not talking about 6 figures in the bank or some impossible dream number. I'm talking about $20,000. That's it, $20,000. And I know that might sound random or maybe even underwhelming, but stick with me, because this number is quietly one of the most transformative milestones in personal finance. And almost nobody frames it that way. I've spent years obsessing over the psychology of money. Not just the spreadsheets and the interest rates, but the way money rewires how we think, how we make decisions, and how we see ourselves. And what I keep coming back to is this. There are invisible lines in your financial life, and crossing them changes everything. $20,000 is the first one that truly matters. Let me explain what I mean. Think about your financial life as pushing a boulder up a long, winding hill. At the bottom, every single inch is agony. You're straining, you're sweating, and the thing barely moves. That's what it feels like when you're saving your first few $1,000s. Every unexpected expense, a flat tire, a medical bill, a broken laptop, rolls that boulder right back down to the bottom. But here's the thing about hills. They have a crest. There's a point where the slope starts to level out, and the boulder gets just a little bit easier to push, then a little easier still, and eventually you reach the top, and gravity starts working with you instead of against you. In personal finance, these are what I call invisible thresholds. They're not marked on any map. Nobody sends you a congratulations card. But the rules of the game genuinely change when you cross them. Your first $1,000 is one. Your first emergency fund is another. But $20,000? That's the big one. That's the crest of the hill. And most people never even realize it's there because they quit pushing somewhere on the slope. So why 20,000 specifically? What's so magical about that number? Well, it's not magic. It's neuroscience. Or more accurately, it's what happens in your brain when the math of your life finally starts to feel manageable. Here's what I mean. When you have no savings, or close to it, your brain operates in what researchers call a scarcity mindset. You've probably experienced this even if you didn't have a name for it. It's that state where every financial decision feels urgent. Should I fill up the tank or wait until Friday? Can I afford to go to the doctor or should I just hope this goes away? Do I buy the groceries I actually want or do I stretch the rice and beans another week? This isn't just stressful. It's cognitively expensive. Studies have shown that financial scarcity can consume so much mental bandwidth that it's equivalent to losing an entire night's sleep. Your IQ effectively drops, not because you're less intelligent, but because so much of your processing power is tied up in survival mode calculations that there's nothing left for the bigger picture. Now, something interesting starts to happen when people build even a small financial cushion. Research on emergency savings has found that having as little as a few $100s set aside can measurably reduce anxiety and improve decision-making. But the real shift, the dramatic one, happens when you reach what most financial planners call 3 to 6 months of living expenses. For the average person, that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $25,000. Let's call it 20,000 as a round, memorable target. When you hit that number, your brain doesn't just relax a little. It fundamentally reorganizes its priorities. You stop asking, how do I survive this month? And you start asking, how do I grow? That's not a subtle shift. That's a completely different operating system. It's the difference between playing defense every single day of your life and finally, for the first time, being able to play offense. And that shift changes everything downstream. But before we get into the psychology of what happens after 20,000, let's talk about the math. Because the math is honestly one of the most beautiful things about this milestone, and almost nobody explains it properly. Let's say you're putting away $1,000 a month. That's aggressive for a lot of people, I know, but just follow the numbers for a moment. If you're investing that $1,000 a month and earning roughly 8% annually, which is close to the historical average of the stock market, here's what happens. Your first $20,000 takes you about 19 months to accumulate. 19 months of discipline, sacrifice, and delayed gratification. That's a long time. That's over a year and a half of saying no to things you want right now for the sake of a future that still feels abstract. But here's where it gets interesting. Your second 20,000? That only takes about 17 months. Why? Because your first 20,000 is now working for you. It's generating returns. It's compounding. You're not just saving anymore. Your money is saving alongside you. Your third 20,000 takes even less time, and the acceleration keeps going. By the time you've built up $400,000, the next 20,000 shows up in roughly 5 months. Not because you're saving more per month, but because compound interest has turned your money into a workforce. You've got hundreds of thousands of dollars clocking in every single day, earning returns on returns on returns. And here's the part that really breaks people's brains when they see it for the first time. An 8% return on $2,000 gives you $160. That's nice. That's a decent dinner out. But an 8% return on $20,000 gives you $1,600. That's almost 2 extra months of savings, generated entirely by the money you already have. Scale transforms percentage gains into real, tangible, life-changing amounts. The same 8% that felt invisible at 2,000 becomes a genuine financial force at 20,000. And at 200,000, it's producing $16,000 a year. That's a part-time salary being generated by money sitting in an account. This is why that first 20,000 is so critical. It's the seed capital for compound growth. It's the foundation that everything else builds on. Without it, you're just running on a treadmill, earning and spending, with nothing accumulating underneath you. With it, you've planted something that grows whether you're awake or asleep. But honestly, the math isn't even the most important part. The most important thing about saving $20,000 isn't the $20,000. It's who you had to become to save it. Think about it. To put away $20,000, you had to do something that the vast majority of people never do. You had to consistently prioritize your future self over your present self, month after month, for over a year. You had to say no to upgrades, to impulse purchases, to the little voice in your head that says, "You deserve this," every time you walk past something shiny. That's not just financial discipline. That's an identity shift. Before 20,000, you might have thought of yourself as someone who's bad with money, someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, someone who just isn't the saving type. But after 20,000, that story doesn't hold up anymore. The evidence is sitting right there in your account. You are, objectively and provably, someone who can control money, someone who can set a hard goal and hit it, someone who can delay gratification for months on end and come out the other side better for it. And let me tell you something about identity shifts. Once they happen, they don't reverse easily. Once you see yourself as someone who builds wealth, you start making decisions like someone who builds wealth, automatically, without the constant willpower battle. It's the difference between someone who's on a diet and someone who just doesn't eat junk food. One is fighting themselves every day, the other just doesn't have that fight anymore. The 20,000 itself is proof of concept. It's proof that the system works, that you can do this, and that the future you've been imagining is actually attainable. That proof is worth more than the money. Now let's talk about what the world looks like from the other side of 20,000, because it's genuinely a different landscape. When you have no savings, every unexpected expense is a crisis. Your car breaks down. That's a disaster. Your hours get cut at work. That's panic. A medical bill shows up. That's a spiral of anxiety and maybe debt. Your entire life is organized around avoiding financial catastrophe, and every bump in the road feels like it could be the one that sends you over the edge. But with 20,000 in the bank, your car breaks down, and it's annoying. That's it. It's an inconvenience. You write the check, you fix the car, and you move on with your week. Your hours get cut, and you've got months of runway to figure out your next move without desperation clouding your judgment. That mental shift from catastrophe to inconvenience frees up an enormous amount of cognitive and emotional energy. And here's what happens with that energy. You start seeing opportunities. When you're broke, you can't see opportunities because your brain is too busy scanning for threats. It's like trying to appreciate a sunset while a dog is chasing you. Your threat detection system is running at full volume, and it drowns out everything else. But when the threats shrink down to inconveniences, suddenly you notice things. A friend mentions a small investment opportunity. A side business idea pops into your head. And instead of immediately dismissing it because you can't afford the startup costs, you actually think about it. A better job opens up in another city. And instead of rejecting it because you can't afford the moving costs, you run the numbers. A rental property comes on the market at a good price, and you realize you could actually make a down payment. $20,000 doesn't just protect you from the downside, it opens up the upside. It gives you the ability to say yes to things that were previously impossible. And speaking of saying yes to the right things, let me challenge something that a lot of financial advice gets completely wrong. You've probably heard someone say you should stop buying lattes to save money. Cut out the avocado toast. Cancel your streaming subscriptions. Pinch every penny. And look, I get the spirit of it. Small expenses add up. But here's the truth. Obsessing over $3 purchases is a losing strategy. It makes you miserable. It saves you almost nothing in the grand scheme, and it distracts you from the decisions that actually move the needle. You know what moves the needle? Housing, transportation, investment strategy, career moves. The difference between a smart housing decision and a dumb one can swing your net worth by $100,000 over a decade. The difference between buying the right car and the wrong one can cost you tens of thousands. The difference between investing consistently and not investing at all can be worth millions over a lifetime. These are the big-ticket decisions. These are the ones that deserve your mental energy. And when you have $20,000 saved, you start to have the clarity and the margin to make these decisions well, instead of reactively, desperately, or out of ignorance. Stop counting pennies. Start making the decisions that are worth tens of thousands. Now here's one of my favorite effects of hitting this milestone, and it's one that nobody talks about enough. It completely transforms your career. Think about most people's relationship with their job. They need the paycheck, desperately. Missing even one pay cycle would send them into a financial tailspin. And when you need something that badly, you have zero leverage. Your boss knows it, your company knows it, and that dynamic shapes everything. You tolerate a toxic manager because you can't afford to quit. You accept a salary that's below market because you're terrified of being unemployed during a job search. You don't push back when you're asked to work unreasonable hours because rocking the boat feels too risky. You stay in a role that's killing your spirit because the alternative, uncertainty, feels like financial suicide. But what happens when you've got $20,000 sitting in the bank? What happens when you know, deep down, that you could walk away and be fine for months? Everything changes. You negotiate differently. Not aggressively, confidently. There's a quiet power that comes from not being desperate, and people can feel it. When you ask for a raise and you genuinely don't need the job to survive, you ask differently. You carry yourself differently. You set boundaries differently. Some people call this walk-away money, and it's one of the most underrated concepts in career development. It's not about actually walking away, though sometimes that's the right move. It's about having the option. The mere existence of that option changes the entire dynamic. I've watched people get promoted, switch to better companies, and negotiate significant raises, all after building up savings that gave them the confidence to stop playing it safe. The money didn't directly cause those outcomes. The psychology did. The savings changed how they showed up, and how they showed up changed their results. Your relationship with work should be a choice, not a hostage situation. $20,000 gives you that choice. All right, so we've covered why $20,000 matters. We've talked about the psychology, the math, the identity shift, the opportunity landscape, and the career transformation. Now, let me warn you about the biggest traps people fall into right when they're about to cross this threshold. Trap number 1, the new car. I cannot tell you how many people save up $15,000, $18,000, $20,000 and then immediately pour it into a depreciating asset. They've been driving a beater for 2 years, they finally have some money, and the temptation to upgrade is overwhelming. So they go buy a $25,000 car, wipe out their savings, and they're right back where they started. Except now, they also have a car payment. Here's a number that should haunt you. The average person spends over $400,000 on cars over their lifetime. $400,000 on something that loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. And these same people will tell you, with a straight face, that they can't figure out why they can't get ahead financially. The car is why. The car has always been why. Trap number 2, the celebration purchase. You hit $20,000 and you feel like you've earned a reward. A vacation, a shopping spree, a new gadget. And you have earned it, don't get me wrong. But the reward isn't the vacation. The reward is the $20,000 and everything it represents. The reward is the freedom, the security, the leverage, and the compound growth that's now working in your favor. Spending it down to celebrate hitting it is like running a marathon and then cutting off your legs at the finish line. The thing that separates people who build wealth from people who don't isn't income. It's the ability to think in terms of opportunity cost. Every dollar you spend is a dollar that's not compounding. That doesn't mean you should never spend money. That's a miserable way to live. It means you should be intentional about it. Spend on things that genuinely improve your life. Don't spend reactively, emotionally, or just because the money's there. That $20,000 is the most powerful money you'll ever have because it's the money that starts the flywheel. Protect it. So let me bring this all together. $20,000 won't make you rich overnight. It won't solve all your problems. It won't buy you a house or fund your retirement or let you quit your job tomorrow. But it will change your relationship with money permanently. It'll shift you out of survival mode and into growth mode. It'll prove to yourself that you can do this. It'll make the math of compound interest start working in your favor in a real, tangible way. It'll open doors you didn't even know existed. It'll give you leverage in your career, clarity in your decisions, and peace in your daily life. And most importantly, it'll give you momentum. Because once you've saved $20,000, saving the next 20 is easier, and the next one after that is easier still. The boulder is past the crest of the hill now, and gravity is on your side. So if you're watching this and you're at 0 or 1,000 or 5,000, keep going. you're closer than you think. And the version of you on the other side of 20,000 is someone you haven't met yet, but I promise you're going to like them. That's the milestone. That's the number. And now you know about it. Go build it.